All right, ready to take a trip back in time with me? We're diving into two mysteries from history that have really captured people's imaginations. One, a truly creepy tale of cannibalism in the Scottish Highlands, and the other, a royal puzzle that still has historians scratching their heads.
It's wild how these stories, even with all the uncertainty, give us this look into the fears and beliefs and power struggles of the time.
Absolutely. The Sunny Bean Clan and the princes in the tower. These stories are so fascinating they've inspired all kinds of books and films, and a good dose of debate, too. Let's start with that Sunny Bean Clan. So, picture a hidden cave on the Scottish coast, only visible at low tide. But instead of treasure, it's filled with, well, the remains of a lot of victims.
It's a story that really grabs you, doesn't it? Horror and folklore all mixed together.
Okay, let's break down this legend. It describes a family led by this guy named Alexander Sawney Bean living in this cave back in 15th century Scotland. And the legend says they were a huge clan, all inbred, and they survived by ambushing travelers, robbing them. And, well, the story says they ate them.
And the details, as they're usually told, are pretty gruesome. Some stories talk about the cave being just full of body parts preserved in different ways, really like something out of a nightmare.
And it gets even crazier. The story says their reign of terror went on for, get this, 25 years. Apparently, it only ended when some people at a fair saw an attack, and the husband, after this desperate fight, got away and told King James VI.
But here's the thing. With all the details and how popular the story is, there's actually zero solid historical evidence that this Sunny Bean clan ever existed.
Wait, seriously? So no records from back then? Nothing in King James VI writings? No physical evidence like, I don't know, mass graves? It seems strange that such a horrifying story, one that supposedly went on for decades, wouldn't leave any trace.
Exactly. That's why a lot of historians think the story's probably made up, or at least a really exaggerated version of something that maybe, happened but was way different.
So if it might be fake, why do you think it got so big and is still around today?
Well, one idea has to do with the word sunny itself. Back then, the English used it as a derogatory term for Scottish people.
So are you saying this whole gruesome story was a way to, like, demonize the Scottish? To make English dominance seem okay?
It's definitely a theory that makes sense. Remember, there was a lot of political tension between England and Scotland, conflicts like the Jacobite rebellions. These uprisings wanted to put the Stuarts back on the throne, and that really challenged English control over Scotland.
So a story about these savage, cannibal Sunnies would have played into the prejudices and fears that were already there, painting the Scottish as, like, barbaric and uncivilized.
Exactly. It could have been a way to make the Scottish seem less human to the English public, making it easier to justify English control and crushing any Scottish independence.
That's a pretty dark thought. But wouldn't people back then have been, like, skeptical? I mean, cannibalism is this is actually something you see every day.
You have to remember that information spread really differently back then. People relied a lot on stories told out loud, word of mouth, and that's where things get exaggerated. Plus, there were these things called chapbooks, basically, like tabloids in the 15th century. People loved sensationalized stories.
Right, those early kinds of media often filled with tales of crime, the supernatural, and anything to grab attention. I guess a story like the Sunny Bean Clan, as far-fetched as it sounds, would have been hard to resist.
Absolutely. It's a classic example of how folklore and propaganda can get mixed up, making it hard to tell what's real and what's not.
So even if we're not sure about the Sunny Bean Clan's real history, it still gives us a really interesting look at the power dynamics and cultural anxieties of the time.
Exactly. It shows how stories, even fictional ones, can reflect deeper truths about a society's fears and prejudices. And in this case, it reminds us to be critical of the stories we hear, especially the ones that reinforce stereotypes or demonize entire groups of people.
All right, so we've talked about the Sunny Bean Clan. Pretty chilling, even if it might be made up. Now, let's switch gears completely. Head over to England, the heart of the monarchy,
Right.
because a real historical drama happened there. The mysterious disappearance of the princes in the tower.
Yeah, this case, unlike the Sunny Bean legend, we've got actual historical documents. But the big question is still there. What really happened to those two young princes?
It's a story with, like, all the ingredients for a great mystery. You got young heirs to the throne, a power-hungry uncle,
Yeah.
a disappearance, super secretive, and rumors of foul play. Where do we even start with this one?
Well, we need to go back to 1483, when King Edward V died unexpectedly. Imagine it, a kingdom in mourning, two young boys suddenly in the spotlight, and all this political scheming swirling around them.
Okay, so picture this. King Edward V dies. He leaves behind his two sons, 12-year-old Edward V, the rightful heir, and his little brother, Richard of Shrewsbury. He was 9, the Duke of York.
And sadly, Edward V, he was too young to rule by himself. So Edward V, to keep things stable, he'd named his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector, basically a regent, to rule until Edward V was old enough.
Seems reasonable enough.
Yeah.
So what went wrong? Was it like enter Tricky Dick, as I kind of think of him?
Well, Tricky Dick might not be too far off, actually. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, he didn't waste time. He took control of the princes, put them in the Tower of London, said it was for their protection.
The Tower of London.
Yeah.
Not exactly a safe place, right?
Yeah.
Especially for two young boys who just lost their dad. More like a fancy prison with a lot of history and pretty ominous vibe, don't you think?
Exactly. And from there, things get darker. Richard started spreading rumors, questioning if Edward V's marriage was even legit, saying the princes were illegitimate.
Hold on, so he was trying to, like, rewrite history to get the throne for himself. That's ballsy. Did anyone actually believe him?
Yeah, unfortunately. Richard, he was a really good politician. He got support from important people in Parliament, convinced them to say the princes weren't legitimate. And just like that, he made himself King Richard III.
So basically, with a wave of his hand, or maybe a royal decree, these two young princes, they go from being heirs to the throne to, like, obstacles in Richard's way.
And as history often shows us, people who get in the way of ambition can meet some pretty bad ends.
Okay, nobody knows for sure what happened, but come on.
Well,
We all know who the main suspect is here, right?
It's true. Richard III, he's been the focus of suspicion for a long time, but there's no direct, undeniable evidence that he killed them. No signed confession, no one who saw it happen, no smoking gun, as they say.
But he had the most to gain from them being gone. And he was the one in charge of the Tower of London, where they were last seen. Hard to ignore that.
That's true. And there's one piece of evidence that makes things even more suspicious. Years later, after Richard III was defeated and killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field, this guy named Sir James Tyrrell, he was arrested for treason against the new king, Henry VII.
Ah, regime change always shakes things up and often brings some secrets to light.
Right. So under interrogation, and it's important to remember, this was probably under pressure, maybe even torture, Tyrrell confessed, said he murdered the princes on Richard III's orders, claimed they were smothered in their beds and then secretly buried somewhere in the tower.
Okay, a confession from someone being tortured. Not exactly the most reliable evidence, but still pretty bad, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely a big piece of the puzzle,
Yeah,
but like with all historical evidence, we got to look at it carefully. Think about how it was obtained.
right. People will confess to anything under torture, but then there's the discovery of those bones, right? Didn't they find skeletons that might belong to the princes?
Yes, in 1674, they were doing renovations at the Tower of London. Workmen found a wooden chest buried under a staircase. Inside, 2 small skeletons. People think they were the missing princes.
Whoa, that's a creepy find. So that's it then. Case closed, right? Richard III, guilty as charged.
Well, not quite. They looked at the bones in the 1930s, said they fit the ages of the princes, but there's never been a real DNA test.
Wait, why not? If they have the bones, why not just solve the mystery once and for all with the technology we have?
It's complicated. Queen Elizabeth II, she's always refused to allow DNA testing on the remains.
Really? Any idea why? Seems like solving a huge historical mystery would be good for everyone.
There are a few ideas. Some say it'd be disrespectful to mess with the remains, especially if they are royal. Others think the monarchy might be worried about what happened if the DNA results definitely linked Richard III to the murders.
So even with the bones, the confession, and all the circumstantial evidence, there's still that little bit of doubt.
Exactly. That's what makes this story so interesting. After centuries of investigations and arguments and theories, we still don't know for sure what happened to the princes in the tower. It remains a mystery.
All right, so we've talked about all the facts, at least what we know from the historical record about the princes in the tower. 2 kids vanish, a power-hungry uncle takes the throne, a forced confession comes out, and then, centuries later, they find these skeletons under the stairs in the Tower of London. It feels like a case that should have a clear answer, but like we said, it's still a mystery.
It's really interesting how this mystery still causes debate, even among historians. You've got those who think Richard III did it, for sure. They point to the circumstances and Tyrrell's confession. But others say he might have been innocent. They've got other ideas about why the princes disappeared.
That's what I love about history, especially these mysteries. We're all kind of like detectives, putting together clues from centuries ago, trying to understand events we'll never fully know. So let's hear about those other theories. What else has been suggested?
One theory is that the princes weren't actually murdered. They were smuggled out of England and lived out their lives in secret.
Wait, really? Like a secret escape? New identities? That sounds kind of romantic, like something you'd read in a book.
Yeah, it's got a certain appeal, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
people who believe this theory, they say there's no proof that Richard III killed them. They say maybe he just needed them out of the picture politically, but didn't want to kill them.
I could see that. Get rid of rivals, but no bloodshed.
Yeah.
Keep looking innocent. It's a smart move.
Yeah.
But is there anything to back up this escape theory?
Well, no, there's never been any real evidence for it. It's mostly speculation, a fun what if, but no solid historical proof.
Okay, so what other explanations are there? I'm guessing there are quite a few, considering how much attention this mystery gets.
Absolutely. There's another theory that says maybe the princes got caught in a power struggle at court, a plot by someone other than Richard III, some powerful people who saw them as a threat.
Oh, court intrigue, betrayal, and secrets and whispers. Sounds like a Shakespeare play. Any names mentioned in this theory?
Some historians have pointed to Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham. He was close to Richard III at first, but then rebelled against him. Others have even said maybe Henry VII, the king who defeated Richard III, maybe he had something to do with it. You know, get rid of rivals and make his own claim to the throne stronger.
Wow. So, is it possible that the whole story, with Richard III as the bad guy, could be totally wrong?
It reminds us that history isn't always so simple. It's all mixed up with ambition and loyalty and betrayal, and often just brutality in the pursuit of power. Like looking at a tapestry. The patterns can change depending on how you look at them, and the light.
That's a great way to put it. So we've got Richard III, the ambitious uncle, maybe framing someone, maybe having the princes taken away secretly. Then we have the Duke of Buckingham, a friend turned enemy, maybe staging a coup. And even Henry VII, the winner, who benefited from the prince's vanishing, he can't be totally ruled out. It's like a historical mystery novel where everyone's a suspect.
Exactly. And that's why this mystery is still so fascinating. It makes us think critically, weigh the evidence, and consider everyone's motives.
So after all this time, centuries of debate and investigations, what do you think? Do you lean towards one theory, or are you, as a historian, supposed to stay neutral?
I think it's super important for historians to be open-minded about these things, not jump to conclusions, let the evidence lead the way. Richard III, he's definitely a strong suspect, but we can't rule out that other people were involved. Maybe the story is much more complicated than we think.
That's a good point. It's like that saying, just because you haven't found evidence of something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We haven't found proof of someone else being guilty, but that doesn't automatically mean Richard III did it.
Exactly. And that's one of the most valuable things we can learn from these kinds of stories. They show us that history isn't some set story that never changes. It's an ongoing process of discovery, of understanding, and then maybe understanding things in a new way.
And sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers, right?
Totally. They make us deal with uncertainty, admit that we don't know everything, and accept that some mysteries might never be fully solved.
Well said. So as we finish up our deep dive into the Sunnybean clan and the princes in the tower, it's amazing to me how both stories, even though they're so different, they both deal with the same things. The drawl of the unknown, the power of those old stories and legends, and how much people are fascinated by the dark parts of history.
That's a really insightful observation. Whether it's that chilling story of cannibals in Scotland or a royal mystery full of intrigue and suspicion, these stories tap into something primal in us, our curiosity about how humans behave and how the past shapes who we are today.
And they show us that history isn't just names and dates. It's a living story full of drama and intrigue and questions that haven't been answered. Questions that make us debate and see things in new ways.
That's it, exactly. And like we've seen with both the Sunnybean clan and the princes in the tower, sometimes just trying to find answers, trying to untangle the threads of history can be just as rewarding as actually finding the solution.
Well said. That's the beauty of it all. To all our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep digging into those mysteries from the past. You never know what amazing stories and surprising insights you'll find.
And remember, the best journeys are sometimes the ones that don't lead to a clear destination, but to a deeper understanding of how complex history is and the power of the human story.
And that's a wrap for our deep dive into these two captivating historical mysteries. We hope you enjoyed it. Join us next time when we'll explore another fascinating part of the past. Until then, Keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop asking questions.